Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So let's discuss now some of the specific pathways that these nerves, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nerves, take in order to innervate the end organs of the target organs. How do they reach them? And so first we will discuss the sympathetic nervous system, and the first problem that the sympathetic nervous system is faced with is that the cell bodies of the sympathetic nervous system are present only in a very restricted area of the spinal cord from T1 to L2 levels, and only this collection of neurons is going to supply the entire body. But this is a restricted region from T1, starting from T1 ending at L2 levels, but it has to supply the entire body, because the sympathetic nerve fibers are present over the entire body. And one example of that is the sweat glands. The sweat glands are only innervated by the sympathetic nerves, and the sweat glands are not just restricted to the thoracic area or the lumbar area, but they are present on the top of the scalp to the soles of the feet. So how do the sympathetic nerves reach above the T1 level and below the L2 levels? So first we will discuss how uh, uh, the nerves that innervate the sweat glands, for example, and other smooth muscles of the hair, for example, uh, uh, from the T1 to L2 levels. Let's discuss first what happens at the T1 to L2 levels and how is the innervation accomplished there. So let's take this uh, uh, cell body, which is whose axon is the preganglionic fiber, and this is probably at the T8 levels. At the T8 level, and at the T8 level, the cell body present at that level at T8 will send out its axon to the postganglionic neuron, which is present in the sympathetic chain. And remember that the sympathetic chain is close to the CNS, so it's just around the vertebral body. So this preganglionic neuron will send out its axon, and it will exit spinal cord, and it will enter the sympathetic chain, and it will synapse with the postganglionic neuron present over here, the second neuron, and it will send out its fibers at the T8 level, at this particular level, and it will enter the spinal nerve, and from the spinal nerve it will be distributed to the body wall, and it will innervate and will reach the sweat gland over there at that level. So in order to see how that is accomplished, we have to take a look at this diagram, and this is representing a transverse section of the spinal cord at some level between T1 and L2, and here is the preganglionic neuron. It is present in the intermediolateral horn of the gray matter of the spinal cord. All the motor fibers, the somatic motor fibers, are present in the ventral ventral horn of the gray matter of the spinal cord. But this is, since this is the autonomic neuron, motor neuron, this is present in the intermediolateral horn of the spinal cord. Nonetheless, it sends out its axon through the ventral root because it is a motor fiber. The motor fibers, they all exit through the ventral root of the spinal nerve. This is the spinal nerve, with its ventral root. This is the dorsal root of the spinal nerve. This is the dorsal root ganglion, and this is the ventral root of the spinal nerve. And the two roots join together and they form the complete spinal nerve. And this is the anterior, this is the ventral ramus, and this is the dorsal ramus. This goes back towards the back of the body wall, and this comes to the anterior part of the body wall. So now this neuron, this preganglionic neuron, it has to reach the ganglion, the sympathetic ganglion, which is present right over here, just in the sympathetic chain, just near the vertebral body. So it comes out through a branch which is known as the white ramus communicans. The white ramus communicans means that it is a communicating branch which is communicating between the ganglion, sympathetic ganglion right here, and the ventral ramus of the spinal nerve. It communicates between the spinal nerve and the sympathetic ganglion. So it's called white because it is myelinated, heavily myelinated. So all myelinated nerve fibers are white, and the non-myelinated nerve fibers, they are gray. So now, because it has to synapse over here with the second neuron is present inside the ganglion, sympathetic ganglion. It synapses with the second neuron, and then the postganglionic fibers, they travel back through the gray ramus communicans, because now the postganglionic fibers, they have to reach out to the end organ, that is the sweat gland, and the sweat gland is present somewhere over here in the periphery. So how is it going to get from this ganglion out to the periphery? And that is, if it can happen if it tags along and enters the spinal nerve, because the spinal nerves are reaching at this level. The spinal nerves are reaching out, going to the periphery. So if it can hop onto a spinal nerve, and tag along with the spinal nerve to the periphery, then it can supply its target organ. So it travels back through the gray ramus communicans, travels back, which reaches the point where the spinal nerve is bifurcating and going to the periphery, and it hops onto the spinal nerve, tags along with it, and it is distributed to its target organ in the periphery. So this is how it reaches. This is the pathway that it takes. So that's pretty straightforward. What happens from T1 to L2 levels? At each level, the preganglionics, they run to their respective ganglions, they synapse over there, and then they send out their postganglionic neurons out, which enter the spinal nerves, and there they reach through the spinal nerves, they reach their respective target organs. But now what would happen if you want to innervate a sweat gland that is below L2, let's say in the lower limb below L2? What will happen there? Or above the T1 level, up to in the neck or the scalp? So what's going to happen then? So what happens is that if you reach down up to L2, now this preganglionic neuron is present at L2 level, but it has to go to the L5 or the S4 level, the S5 level. So it will exit through the white ramus communicans and reach the L2 ganglion right over here. It will enter the L2 ganglion over here, but it will not synapse. It will not synapse with any postganglionic neuron, but it will travel, descend downwards into the sympathetic chain, and the ganglions are missing over here, but there is an L2 ganglion, there is an L3 ganglion over here, then there will be an L4 ganglion, L5 ganglion, and S1 ganglion, S2, S3, and S4, and so forth. right up to the sacral level. So uh, this ganglion, this fiber from L2 will enter although it has entered the L2 ganglion, it will not synapse there, and it has to, let's say, it has to innervate uh, a sweat gland present at the L4 level. So now it will descend from the L2 and go right up to uh, the L4 or the S2 ganglion, and it will synapse over there. And then at that level, the postganglionic fibers will come out of there and they will reach their respective spinal nerves and tag along those spinal nerves and then innervate their respective target organs. And the exact process, this exact process occurs at a level above T1. The At T1, if we wish to innervate some structure, some sweat gland, some smooth muscle that is present above the T1 level, the preganglionics will exactly use the same pathway. They will enter the cervicothoracic ganglion, which is the high, and the superior cervical ganglion is the highest ganglion present in the of the sympathetic chain, and it will reach there and then ascend upwards and reach the respective ganglion where it has to send out its it will synapse there, and then when it synapses the postganglionic fibers, they reach their respective levels by synapsing the postganglionic neurons will uh, hop onto their respective spinal nerves, and then they will innervate the target organs, such as the sweat glands. So this is what happens when you have to innervate the structures of the body wall.